All right. Yeah, so I'm Zach. You can follow me on Twitter. So I want to start out by saying thank you. So Harold Jimenez was supposed to talk right now, this second, but apparently something came up, and so I had to take his place last minute. And so whatever happened, like, that's unfortunate. But I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really glad to be speaking in my native state, right? I also want to say thank you to all the sponsors and all of the contributors and the other speakers at this conference. And let's just give a round of applause to everybody who put in all the hard work to this conference. So I want to open up with a question. It's sort of an open-ended question, but I'll discuss this. Basically, what is native? What does that mean to you? I'm a native Vermonter, and so I was born here, right? And
everyone who remembers when you moved here died.
That's really depressing. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so whatever. Moving on. Yeah, so basically native is like where you're born, where you're from, right? Your origins, where are your roots? And my roots are here, and they're very deep. When we talk about native as like geeks, right? We talk about apps. We talk about native apps. And usually those are like applications that are designed by us specifically for a device like an iPhone, right? And usually they're designed not on an iPhone though, right? Like we build them on another machine entirely. And then think of this. So the source code for this application is hosted somewhere else, right? The home of this source code of this application is usually GitHub, something like that. Google, I don't know. There's a few others, but no one uses them. And so just internalize that. Let that process in your mind, right? And I think it's not really where you're from. It's where your roots lie. It's where you want to be, right? It's where your heart lies. And for me, my heart lies here in Vermont. Like, obviously, I have deep family roots, but it could be anywhere, right? Like, I woke up this morning and like sun was coming up over Burlington, and it was just a beautiful day. And I was like, oh shit, I have to talk today. But I got over it because I'm just in this beautiful place, and there's all these great people, and all my friends are here. And I just love it, and I love that you guys of the Ruby community can come here, and I can hang out with you, and like it's not on IRC, it's not on email, it's not on GitHub, it's here where I'm from, and like that means so much to me. But anyways, so Vermont is sort of like a hidden gem, right? So you guys come here, and like you might not know so much about it, but Vermont's a very conservative state, and like there's a lot of liberals, obviously, but it's mostly conservative. Like we have laws in place like to prevent billboards from being put up to like detract from our views and such, and people's homes, so that they retain value. The cost of living is not very high, and the average income is much lower. So people struggle just to be here because they want to be here, right? This is Vermont. We love this place, and yeah, it's sad because a lot of younger people, like a lot of my friends, moved away, like California, New York, or whatever, and then like. But they always come back. They always come back to Vermont eventually, either to see family or just go skiing or whatever. And this will always be like a part of their lives. This will always be their roots. And so the part of their roots is their inheritance in this community. And so Ruby sort of has this concept of inheritance, right? And like I have my own inheritance in my family. And someone asked me the other day, they're like, hey, Zach, how do we find the children for a given class? And I said, I don't know. But I actually looked it up. And this is how you do it, right? So class is an object in Ruby, and it has this method inherited. It's almost like method missing. And whenever you inherit this class, this method gets called every single time. So I've written a class with pen, and I've made an array of people, right? So this is just a really abstract concept of inheritance. Whenever you create a new member of a person, they get added to an array. And in my version of this class, so it started with my parents, who were born in Rutland, own a small business in Rutland, and have 3 beautiful children, including myself. And they've been married for 30 years, and I think that's great. And it started with my brother. He's the oldest. He's actually peace age. And then my sister and myself. I'm the youngest, right? So we all inherit a person. It could be my mom, my dad, whoever, right? And so my family then was my brother and my sister. And then my sister had Oliver, who's my nephew, and Alice is my niece. And they're 4 and 2 right now. So my family are these people, right? This is my family. But your family can be composed of anybody. It doesn't matter if they're blood related, if they're just friends that you've known for a long time. A family is composed of people that are there for you and affect you as a person, make you feel whole. You know, they're there for you when you need them most. And it just so happens that they're blood related with me. And I know there's plenty of other people I could mention, but this is all I have room for. So that's basically my family history, right? So that's where we are now in time with those people. But like I was saying about Pete, so he moved here at age 19, right? And he's not a native Vermonter because he wasn't born here, but he's more of like an honorary native, right? So because he has roots here for the last 11 years or whatever, and obviously he's making a difference, right? He helped organize this conference. He brought all of us here together, not by himself, but with his friends and with his family, and he helped make this happen. And I just think that's really great. And 20 years ago, Matt's invented Ruby, and basically he gave us an outlet to join into the shared history of the community of Ruby and all the people that helped pioneer the language and develop like the first programs in Ruby and the first applications that people were using way back 20 years ago. Some of these still exist and some of these still work, which is an amazing thing. And I'm going to show you a few of them. And together, basically, like I'll show you the footsteps of Ruby and how it was evolved way back when, right? So that's my plan. I'm starting with dRuby. It was developed by Masatoshi Seki in Japan. It's a stateful web server. So it's a way to pass Ruby objects across networks and processes in a distributed fashion. It started out as a servlet extension for basically the original WebRick. So WebRick is like a Ruby web server. Years ago, we had SHTTP serve, and this was imported in like 2006, so it's almost 10 years old. But that was a completely separate version. Like he had already been writing this extension before it was imported to Ruby, and that's impossible to track, right? Like that's just on his computer in Japan somewhere where he's kept it. So I've written a little chat server thing, and I'll show you, basically walk you through that. So the first thing we need for a chat is a server. And let me cheat here. It's DRB or dRuby? It's DRB/DRB, right? Something like that. And the first thing we need. Uh-oh. Yep. This is why we have Scotch tape. This whole thing is orchestrated via Scotch tape. Okay, we're good. All right. So the first thing we need is a connection class. And this is going to handle our clients and distribute messages and such. So the first thing is we have our class, and then we include DRB undumped, which is it'll marshal our instances of our class over the network. So we have our initializer, and we set, oops, need this. We need messages, right? And we need users. So we're having a chat. And first thing we do is we're going to need to do, oops. We're going to initialize our messages and our users. First step. And then one thing that we want to do is be able to add a user, right? Oops. Sorry. Delete that. Start over. Last minute, right? A connection has a username and a reader for the remote connection. That's what we need. And we want a server and the remote. So we set the username. This will all make sense in a minute, maybe. I still don't understand it, but I just want to show you. Key equals remote.key. Okay. And then we have this function, which basically outputs a string to the server. Whoops. Delete that. Okay. And we listen on a connection. What's that? I spelled it wrong? Thanks, guys. There should not be a V there, no.
You're missing initialize. Initializer is spelled wrong.
Init, E, is it?
L-I-Z-E with no R. Have you ever paired program with 100 people?
This is my first time. Thanks.
No R.
What's that?
No R. Initialize.
Oh, right. Thanks, Steve. This is why you're here. You were sent to help me. Okay, so then listen takes a string, and we do remote dot message, and we pass the key and the string. Suddenly this doesn't make sense to me, but I'm gonna go with it. We'll get an error and we'll figure it out. Okay. Next thing we need is our server class, which handles the connections. So we have class server, messages, right? And users. This is what I started to type, so it might look familiar. And we have client, and we're going to do connection.new, and we're going to use the server itself and the remote that we're passing in of the client. And then we do users. So users is a hash. Oops. So this is add user, right? Okay. Add the user to the hash for the client, and then we just want to return the client. There's probably a better way to write this, but again, I wrote this at like 5:30 in the morning on Friday, so this is what you get. Sorry if it sucks. Yeah, and then the distribute method, so we want to implement this. And this takes a remote, and then the message again. And we do user, we want to set the username, users remote, oops, dot username. Okay, so when we get to our messages, there's gonna be two different types of messages that we want to do. One is like a message from a person, and then a message to a person. So like IRC has this thing with like arrows around like people that send you a message, and then if you say message, there's no arrows, so that you can visually discern the two. So in this version of my chat, going to do username for this one, and string, and message 2 will be username string. Okay, and then we need to go through each of the keys on the server that we've connected to and process these messages and output them. So the next step would be remote, or right, the user m dot keys dot each do m, right? M will be the message. And so what we want to do then is users this client and output the message to when the remote is the same. So basically this is something that you put. You wrote this message. The remote is the same as the originating message, so. And then otherwise, we just output the other version.
So line 38, is that supposed to be users sub remote?
No.
Shouldn't have it on it.
Should it be?
Just users dot. Oh,
It looks good. Let's see how it works. 38, yeah. Keys each do, and then the member. Oh, right. You're totally right. That doesn't make sense. Thanks, guys.
While we're at it on 17.
Hold the phone. This is I'm talking. So you just do something on your computer. Thanks. Okay.
Zach, you misspelled initialize on 23, but.
You know what, Mark? I probably did.
Oh, you did. I'm serious. Yeah, well, you forgot your pants.
Is this just a big joke? Like, am I just up here as a joke? Okay. What? All right, help me out here. What line?
123.
123? There's not 123 lines. All right, Price. Whose line is it?
2, 3.
Steve.
2, 3. 2,
In it. IA. Am I good?
Colon 17. Can I get a colon 17? Can you change string to str? Can you change key to @key?
Am I looking at the same screen?
Well, you gotta go up a couple to see the str.
Oh,
is faster.
STR. I got you. Thank you. Yes.
And it needs to be at key.
And it needs to be @key. Thanks, Danielle.
Beautiful.
Okay. That's enough. Okay. We have no tests. We have no tests. Okay. D or Ruby, right? So Mark, I have this question. Let me just aside for a minute. Why can't we have DRB as the protocol and DRuby? Do you know this one?
I don't. It's hard coded in DRuby. I don't know why.
Well, I've thought about writing a patch for this, and like I asked Eric, and basically they should be able to interoperate, but they don't.
I agree. Yeah, some places it's DRuby, some places DRB. It should be.
I always make this mistake. I always type DRB in as a protocol, but it doesn't work.
Only there was a place you could contribute that sort of information.
I would, yeah. Maybe I should write a book about it. I love you. Okay, and then let's do our client. All right, next step. Okay. A user is basically going to be a person in the chat room. This is going to be really fun. I can't wait to see it run. We're just going to set up some stuff first. Step one. All right, and then this is sort of the magic right here. We have a remote and we have a string. And this is all you need. Why we have remote? We don't really, but we don't really need that. I'm keeping it there because it's in my notes. Okay, so first thing we want to do is open the connection to the server, and we want to ask the person for their name. What's your name, right? And then username will be this thing. I'm sure you guys from the Girl Develop It program last weekend remember this. It's sort of similar to what we did. Okay, so we want to start the service. And initialize the object. So DRB object. This is how we pass the connection through the object. And then entry. Okay, first thing, I forgot a step. We have to initialize the user, right? With this thing. Okay. Wild. Okay. All right, let's try it. Wish me luck. We want to start up the server first before we start the client. Looks good. And then, ooh, make sure I'm using trunk. Okay. My name's Zach. Great. Undefined method, add user, DRB line 1588. So that doesn't help. Who's that? What's your name, sir? Jay. Thanks, Jay. On the client? Yeah. So let's go there. Ah, you're right. Chat. Right? Dot say. Don't ask why. Just enjoy. Zach. Great, another one. What am I missing? I did.
Your remote object is uninitialized. It's nil.
Okay.
So remote object, the object you're calling .add user on,
Mm-hmm.
is nil. So something funky is happening here. You're passing in remote.
That's what I'm supposed to do.
Remote caption. Never mind.
This is the server, right? Let me cheat. I'm going to cheat. No, that's the client. Okay, this is what it's supposed to look like. No remote. Entry.say. And we have that. Are they not identical?
You make the user.
Right, you're calling add user on the server object, right?
All right, one at a time. You start.
You're calling add user on the remote server object, right?
Entry?
On line 25, you're calling add user
Yeah.
on remote object.
Right.
And it's saying there's no method add user on remote object. So doesn't that mean your server doesn't have the method?
Yeah. It does though, right? I wrote it. You saw me write it. Did you not?
Hop back over to your.
Oh, at least 30 seconds ago.
Is there any output on the server console?
No. We got nothing, guys.
Zach, on your server, are you actually setting up an instance of the go to the server side? Go down to where you're starting the service. You're not actually adding anything onto the service. You have to put an instance of the object there. Your flag.
Server new on line 45 at the end.
You're right. You are totally right.
Why I wrote a book on it.
Okay. So, Mark. Oh, great. What do we got now here? Distribute. Oh, man. No, I don't believe in that.
All I'm saying is Nils made Y quit programming, so.
All right, what am I missing? Say. Distribute. Undefined method distribute for nil. Line 13. Oh. No?
You're not saving that.
Yeah, that's not even a thing.
Server's not initialized, saved to a variable. On line 9, maybe add server equals server,
No.
please. Sudo.
I tell ya. This is why. This is why I don't do this. What am I missing? DB server line 14, say.
You also did set remote initialization. Yeah.
Do the same thing we did with server.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong note. That would help. Try it. I like you guys. You're helping me out. Okay.
What's our collective rate?
I don't. Exactly.
I want a raise.
All right, moving on. We got it working. Thank you, everybody. Oh my. Okay. Next one. You know what, Brett? Mind your P's and Q's. Okay. Next one is RSS. The rest of them are much simpler. This one is just, that DRB one was just crazy. I don't know why I thought I'd try it, but whatever. Okay, so RSS is basically stands for really simple syndication. And it's used to subscribe users to web services like blogs, if you want to receive updates via the web. And it was written by Kohei Suto, who is a longtime contributor to Ruby. And he runs Clear Code, and he's probably one of the legendary Rubyists in Japan. Yeah, so RSS was imported into Ruby in like 2000 something, and the coolest part about this is we actually have 2 attendees at this conference who have patches in RSS, not including myself. And one of them is Steve, and he wrote a documentation patch for rss.rb. And when I was looking it up, so there's been 5 whole patches in like 10 years to rss.rb. Of course, there's like other libraries involved in this, right? But for this one file, Steve has one of 5 patches. Yeah. So, go Steve. And the other member is Mike Denemy. I don't know where you are, somewhere. No, there's Mike. And the RSS crew. And he wrote another documentation patch and actually delved into like it's crazy meta programmed and like all these intricate things and like abstract models and stuff that I would never even understand. But he worked through it and we worked on it together, and he wrote another great patch for RSS. So Burlington Ruby has roots in Ruby already, not to mention this talk. But so I've gone ahead of you now. This one's a little easier. And I've written an RSS app. It's just a Rails app. And it just has some posts. Right? So I'm a blogger. I have a blog. And I want to interface with my blog. So I'm going to write a Ruby script to do that. That's not typing. And the first thing we do is, yeah, we're going to need another library, which I don't have time to talk about, but it's OpenURI, and it's helpful. Our URL is obviously this one, but it's .rss. And we open this URL using OpenURI, and then we process it. So we want the feed. And then we put the title. And we want to process the entries. Easy. Yes, it should, totally. Thank you. Okay, there we have it. So this is my blog with these posts. And I've processed them using the RSS library in the standard library. Yeah, that one was much easier. Okay. Let's get it together here, Zach. Next one is Rdoc. So Rdoc was originally written by Dave Thomas, and he was the author of Pickaxe. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a great book. You should pick it up. And this is not Dave Thomas. This is actually Eric Hodel. And he's now the maintainer of Rdoc since 2008 or so. And Rdoc was originally imported and written by Dave Thomas, something like 2004. So it's almost 10 years old. And it has quite a lot of code in it. It's a very big library. But the coolest part about it that I think in our modern times is it has a pure Ruby markdown parser written in it. And it uses like KPEG or something to generate the grammar. But I'll show you this briefly. If you've ever used Rdiscount, it has a similar interface to what I'm going to show you. And basically, it does one very simple thing. And it takes text, if I spell that right. And we can set up other options. And Rdoc lets you like actually generate like table of contents and stuff, but we don't have time for that. So I'm just going to do like the basics. And we're going to parse markdown. So we have this other method that does everything for us. And we need to set up our formatter. and then parse it. Okay, so our markdown is going to be something like and we can even add like Ruby code in here, right? That's not a valid Ruby code. Let's try that again. Okay, so initialize our markdown parser with markup, and then we just put markdown to HTML. Let's see if that works. Okay, so we have HTML now from our markdown string, or you can read a file or whatever you want, but that's the basics of the parser. And it's good if you just, like it's probably not the fastest thing because it's in KPEG, but if you put it in front of like a web server and then do a lot of caching, like you could handle it. But it's cool because Markdown's this thing, and we all love to write Markdown in HTML, so it's very helpful. The next one is curses. This is probably the oldest one that I'm going to show you, and it was written by Shugo, who's a Ruby committer, and he wrote like refinements, if any of you are familiar. So curses is basically a way to develop user interfaces back when we didn't have Windows or like graphical terminals or anything like that. Like this is way back, okay? So this was imported in Ruby 16 years ago. Like before Pete was a Vermonter. I was just a little kid and I didn't know anything. He was writing curses. So, and I think the craziest part about this is what he wrote 16 years ago, it still works. Like today I can use this, and I'll show you. The first thing we need to do is find my notes, and then include curses because I'm lazy. We init screen, and then I want some color, so I can show you guys some colors. So those are always cool. And we're going to use green text, and these are just constants on curses, and this is our background. So it's going to be really classic. We want to find the width of the terminal, so we do the lines that curses knows about. I don't know why we have that, but we do. And then the columns minus message length 5x2. And then we set the position to write our string because we're just going to do something basic like this. And I guarantee it's not going to work. All right, let's just see what the error is. Undefined local variable message. So message equals what? What do we want to say? Shout things out. Give me some ideas. It's lunchtime. See, that's bad karma. They're all going to be hungry now.
You misspelled lunch.
Thank you.
I think with and I are wrong too. You reference it as W and H.
Well, line 12 and 12.
Ski Mad River.
Line 12 should be set pause width and height. Width and height.
Thank you. Where's the other W?
Did you say it?
Good call, Steve. Lunchtime down. Chris has these other cool things. I'll just show you quick. This is probably like my favorite one. Oh, you can't even see it because my monitor is like so zoomed in. Yeah, I don't want to do that. That's way too much work. Let's see, what other ones? This one's funny. Right? These are all the cool things you can do with Ruby. Right, Ruby. Last one. Okay, we're almost there. Fiddle. This one's really cool. I really want to talk about this one. It was written by Aaron Patterson about, I think, like 4 years ago, I want to say, 3 or 4 years ago. Fairly new. But it's based on this API that we have in Ruby core called DL. And what that is, it's a very old way of handling dynamic languages. Or not dynamic languages, but dynamic libraries, sorry. And right, so DL is this old Unix thing for like wrapping libraries written in like other languages other than Ruby. And we can do this usually in C, right? So we can do this using Ruby. And I've written like an extension to time using it that I'll show you. But basically, what you need to know is it's using an older API and a new API, which is FFI, and it merges them, and it's backwards compatible, and there's people working on like Windows compatibility, and it's the new thing. It's fairly new. Okay. Start out with this guy. Can't type. You're gonna love this one, Steve. So DL open, if we just pass nil, it takes all the libraries that we already have loaded in memory when the interpreter starts. So like CLib, the Ruby library in C and all that stuff. And we have access to them right in Ruby, which is probably the coolest part of this. And we're gonna use this to set an actual time value using time.h in our operating system. And that's our arguments, and then we will also need a return value. And it outputs long. If you actually look up like the man page for this library, it'll tell you what it takes and what it returns as a value in C.
You're gonna want to change it to handle on line 9.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, almost there. And this uses diff time. We're going to use diff time and override the subtraction operator, minus operator, whatever you want to call it, and use the operating system subtraction instead. And this returns a double. This is really readable, right? Okay. That easy. So in order to use this, we're going to take 2 timestamps. So I'll need time 1. And we're gonna wait 15 seconds and start up a new time. Like you could use like the Ruby way of doing this, but I'm just showing you through Fiddle. Basically all we need to do is this. And we're actually using this method that I've defined and not the Ruby time subtraction. So I'm gonna run this. It's gonna take about 15 seconds, right? And once it's finished, come on.
Take a deep breath.
There we go. 15 as a double. So that's the last one, and I just want to thank everybody for your time and all of your help pairing with this. And it's been a really great conference, and I'm glad everyone could make it out. And I'm very happy to be here and speak to you. And just thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.